Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. I'm back with another lesson here, a little bit different than what my normal videos are. Typically in the past couple of videos I've been doing a lot of tutorials on how to play songs, but I have a lot more knowledge that I can offer to my audience other than just teaching how to play a song. For a lot of you that don't know, I actually did go to music school. I'm still in music school. I'm actually working towards my master's right now to get my master's in classical guitar performance. So I feel like I have a lot of knowledge that I can share aspiring guitar players. So I want to talk today about one of the most important things and often overlooked things, the major scale. I think the major scale is the most important scale out of all the scales that you could ever learn. And we're going to zoom in and we're going to talk about that, because with the major scale, all other scales are derived from it. The minor scale, pentatonic scales, blues scales, all kinds of different scales are all derived from the major scale, and that's where we get our chords too. So I want to zoom in on the neck and I want to talk about how we arrive to those things so that we can apply those as guitar players to other things and other keys, so that way we have better knowledge of the instrument and how music works as a whole. Alright guys, so hopefully this is a proper viewing angle for you guys to kind of see what we're going to talk about. So I want to talk about the major scale and why the major scale is so important. So I think the major scale is often overlooked as a scale just because it's kind of like boring and it's not typically thought of as, you know, fun, or it's just kind of dull, you know? So it's pretty boring, right? There's not a lot going on to it, not a lot of melodic content. But, however, there is a lot that is derived from the scale, so that's what I want to talk about it. So if you've never actually played a major scale before, a major scale is based off a whole half step pattern, which means you have 2 whole steps, a half step, 3 whole steps, and then another half step. And that's how you can create any major scale. So we're going to do this all in the key of C major. So if we take the key of C, and by the way, if you're not familiar, the key of C is all of the white keys on the piano, so there are no sharps or flats. It's all the natural notes in Western musical scale. So if we play the scale accordingly, we get the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C again. So that's a 7-note scale, 8 notes if you include the octave, right? So that's our do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. And I want to talk about the importance of understanding the scale and understanding the intervals in between. So if we analyze the intervals in the scale, we have a root, a major second, a major third, a perfect fourth, a perfect fifth, a minor 6, excuse me, a major 6, a major 7, and then the octave. And again, that can be derived by making any type of major scale is understanding that whole half foundation. So if I apply this to any single string, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, and then I get my whole major scale. So you can apply this to any single string pattern. Right? Now I want to talk about why each of those intervals are important. So if you didn't know, a major scale derives all of our chords. So when we're thinking about playing in a key, so let's say in this case, since we're staying in key, we have a progression of like C to F to G to C. Well, those chords belong in that key. And if you think about it, if you take the first note of those chords, so the C being the 1 chord, the F being the 4 chord, and the G being the 5 chord, well, that's how it is. So if you think about every single note that belongs in a key, each one of those notes belongs to a specific chord. So in the key of C, since we have a C note, that's our C chord. Since we have a D, that's our D minor chord. Since we have an E, that's our E minor chord. Since we have an F, that's our F major. Since we have a G, that's our G major. Since we have an A, that's our A minor. And since we have this B, that's our B half diminished, or our B minor 7 flat 5. And then we have the C octave again, which is our C major chord. So on the screen right here, I'm going to display each chord in a diatonic key of a major scale and how they're always presented. So the 1 chord in any single key is always going to be major. The 2 chord is always going to be minor. The 3 chord is always going to be minor. The 4 chord will always be major. The 5 chord will always be major. Usually the 5 chord is a 5-7, but it's always going to be major. It's always going to be a dominant 5-7 major chord. The 6th chord will always be minor, and the 7th chord will always be a minor 7 flat 5 chord until you get back to C. So when you apply this to any single key, always remember that the 1 is major, 2 and 3 are minor, 4 and 5 are major, 6 is minor, and the 7 chord will always be that minor 7 flat 5 chord. Now I want to talk about why this is important when we're talking about the major scale. So when we have the major scale, all of the notes to create the notes of those chords are all embedded in that scale. And we always have to think about 1, 3s, and 5s. So the 1, 3, and 5 notes of a major scale will always make up a chord. So if we think about the C major, if we take the 1, the 3, and 5 of the C major scale, so C, D, E, F, G, or excuse me, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So if I take the 1 being C, I take the 3rd being E, and I take the 5th being G. So the notes of a C major chord are C, E, G. Check this out. C, E, G, right here. C, E, G, C, E. C major chord. Now, let's say I want to build the notes of an E minor, or excuse me, a D minor chord being our 2 chord, right? So now I have to think, okay, well, what's the 1, 3, and 5? And now we're starting on the D note. So I have to go up in the scale a 3rd from the D. So I'm thinking 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have an F. So D to F. There's my 3rd, my minor 3rd. And now I have to find the 5th of that chord. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, here it is. It's an A. D, F, A. There's my D minor triad, my 2 chord. Now let's do it with the E minor chord, right? So our 3 chord. So now we have to figure out 1, 3, and 5 of the chord by starting with the E note. So I'm thinking, okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have E to G, that's my 3rd. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so E, G, B. That's my E minor chord, right? Now I want to do my 4 chord, right? So I gotta start on my F. That's the 4th chord, right? So I have to figure out what the 3rd is. 1, 2, 3. Oh, 3. Okay, so here's my A, F to A, there's a 3rd. Now I have to figure out the 5th. So 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, okay, so F, A, C, right? There's my F chord. Now you're seeing the pattern here, right? So you always want to start on the note that you're trying to figure out the notes of the chords and go up in the scale. So sometimes you're going to get beyond the octave. So even though we're just dealing with C, D, E, F, G, back to C, sometimes you have to add in notes above that, and you'll see this with this G chord. So with this G chord, now I have to figure out the notes of that, right? So I want to start on a G. G, A, B. Oh, here's my B. Okay, so I have G, A, B. So there's my 3rd. Now I have to figure out the next note. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the C is the 4. Now I gotta go up in the scale again. Oh, okay, here it is, right here. So G, A, B, C, D. There's my G major triad, right? So the notes G, B, D make up the G chord, or the 5 chord of C. Now we're gonna do this with the A minor chord. So now we need to find an A, right? Okay, so our next A would be here. So now I have to figure out the notes of an A minor triad. So I'm thinking 1, 2, 3. Okay, here's a 3rd. Here's a 3rd. So 1, 2, 3. I have A, B, C. I have to figure out the next note. Okay, so D. That's my 4th. Oh, E is the 5th. Check that out. There's our A minor. A, C, E make up the notes of an A minor triad. Now for that B half diminished chord, let's figure out the notes on that chord, right? So it's kind of a little wonky, right? So I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, 3, right? So 1, 2, 3. So I have a D. Okay, so I have that note in there. 1, 2, Okay, so there's my third. Now I have to find a fifth. Oh, there's an F. So that F note is in there. And now with the half diminished, you also have to find the seventh of that chord, right? So we have to go up even further in the scale. So I have my B, I have my D, I have my F. Oh, now I have to go up again, so I have an A, right? And all those notes make up that triad, so B, D, F, A. So if you play this in order of succession by which the chords go, it's going to follow a chord scale, which is going to be like this: C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A, B half diminished to 7, back to C. So the big takeaway is I want you to understand when you're trying to construct the major scale that everything is derived from it. The chords, the melodies, the way that the chords are laid out on the fretboard. So always remember that whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half pattern, and also remember the way that the chords are laid out. So the 1 chord, again, will always be major, 2 will always be minor, 3 will always be minor, 4 and 5 will always be major, the 5th is always that dominant 7, the 6th is minor, and the 7th chord of a major scale will always be that minor 7 flat 5 chord. Now I want you to be able to apply this in terms of any single key. So when I get questions about how do I work out songs or how I do song tutorials, a lot of the times I always try to figure out the key first, because with this knowledge you can figure out pretty much any single progression in any single key as long as it's diatonic. Sometimes composers, when they're writing songs, will go outside of the key, but there's also ways to figure that out, and I'll have future videos on that. Those are what we call like substitution chords, or where you go outside of the key. But for 90% of the time, let's say, which is a fair amount of the time, if you're in the key of C, you only have these chords that can possibly be in that song, right? Which is going to be that C, D minor, E, F, G, A, B half diminished 7 flat 5, and then back to C again. So always consider that when you're trying to learn how to play a song, or you're trying to see what chords belong in a song because you really want to learn how to play it, always try to determine the key first, because if you can determine the key center, then you can figure out the chords that belong in that key, is which we call diatonic. Diatonic means remaining in that key. And this applies to any single key that you're playing in. So no matter if you're in the key of C, if you're in the key of A flat, those same types of principles are going to always apply. The chords will always be in that same sequential order, and the major scales will always be made up that same exact way. Now, one thing that I want to talk about too, without giving you, sensory overload, is the 1 of a major key and the 6 of a major key. Is there's a relationship between both of them. So like in this case, in C major, the 6th chord, or the 6th note of the key, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is an A note, which happens to be our A minor. This is what we call relative major and minor. So the 1 chord and the 6th chord have a relationship between each other. So C and A minor, that's what we call the relative major and minor of each other. Or if you're in A minor, for example, the C major would be the relative major. So in this case, being that we're in C major, the A minor is the relative minor. The reason that's important is because if you restack all of the notes of C major, but you start on an A, so let's say we start on this A, this is what we call the A minor scale. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Oops. So notice I'm playing all the same exact notes, but now I'm just playing them in a new order. So we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, C major, right? And now we have this A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A minor. So all the notes are exactly the same. They're just reordered differently. So remember, C major and A minor, although they are their own things, there's a relationship between both of them because they both share the same characteristic notes. Now when you're playing in A minor, all of those chords that we played in C major are going to be the same, except they're going to be a little bit different just because of the way the the minor scale is stacked. And the chords are going to be in a different order. But that is one thing to remember too, so always think about that. And I'll have more videos coming up about some of the music theory and stuff about the minor scale. But again, remember, The major scale, I think, is arguably the most important scale because even all of our pentatonic scales are all derived from C major. So, for example, let's talk about A minor pentatonic quick. So A minor, all the key white notes on the piano, so all the key is C. Check this out. The notes in an A minor pentatonic scale. A, C, D, E, G, A. So those are the notes, 5 notes. A, C, E, or excuse me, A, C, D, E, G, A. All the notes of the key C. So once you know your major scale, then you can construct any single scale you want, because the major scale is the fundamental scale of all Western music. It is the foundation, and that's where everything is derived from. Alright guys, that was the video. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you really did get something out of it. I hope I clarified some things that maybe were confusing in the past. I have all kinds of other videos on the channel, all types of different tutorials, so give them a check out. They'll be on the video here somewhere. And also, if you're new, consider subscribing. I post new videos every single Wednesday, and I'll see you in the next video.